Welcome to the Asian Supermarket. I'm your host Christina from America.
And I'm Carmen from Australia.
Hello and welcome to episode 18. Our wonderful guest this week is Emily, our half Aussie, half Japanese friend who's worked in a bunch of different industries after moving back to Japan. We have a really interesting conversation with her about her background, her experiences, and how she embraces both sides of her culture.
So grab your favorite sushi rolls as we chat with our guest in episode 18. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 18. Today we have a special guest, Emily, who will be talking about her experience as someone that's mixed with an Australian dad and Japanese mom. She lived in Japan when she was 3 to 7, and then she eventually moved back when she was 18. So welcome, Emily.
Hi.
So, Carmen, how did you guys meet each other?
Yeah, so when I moved to Australia, she was actually someone who was in my primary school. So I've pretty much grown up with her, and our moms are good friends. Even though we weren't really in the same friendship groups, but yeah, it was cool just, being around.
So usually we like to start off with the icebreakers. So Emily, what is your favorite Japanese dish that you can't get or isn't the same overseas?
I think pretty much most Japanese foods like sushi, ramen is completely different to what it is over in Japan. But I think home cooked meals, like we have this thing called karaage, and it's like fried chicken, but it's like soaked in soy sauce and ginger. And I think that you can't really get in Australia that much, but it's really, really good with like rice and beer and yeah, I don't think you can get that in Australia. But yeah, pretty much home cooked meals is really, really, you can't get, they're like little pickles and miso soup is really different.
Do you reckon like the sushi and stuff, it's completely different, right? Like sushi, ramen,
it's so
and things.
different. I remember I had an Australian friend come to Japan, and they had like their girlfriend, their family here, and I took them to a proper sushi restaurant, and it's like you sit on a counter table, and I was like, oh, what do you want to eat? They're like, oh, we love salmon, blah, blah, blah. So I ordered all this sushi, and they're like, oh my God, it's raw. I was like, yeah, it's sushi, Like, why is the fish raw? It's not cooked. And I think they were used to like the California rolls.
Yeah.
That, like, I think that's their image of sushi. And they're like, oh no, we want it cooked. I was like, okay.
Dude, it's so crazy. And like the tuna and stuff, it's all like mixed with mayonnaise and stuff over here. It's not raw. I remember I was so shocked as well, because when I went to Japan, I went into the sushi restaurant, and it was basically like the chef was there, and then around him was just all raw fish, like blocks of like raw fish, seafood. It was all raw, and then they already had like the rice balls done. So basically we would just get the thing and put it on top, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, it's like so crazy. It's completely different.
But it's like they have like a rule where only men can make the sushi.
Oh.
Because I think like women have like colder blood and the hands are colder. So you have to have like a certain temperature to make to hold the fish.
I thought it'd be better for women though, because like isn't like the cold hands like
that's what I thought. Yeah.
Wow, that's so interesting. That could be a fun fact too.
I know. Yeah. Bonus fun fact. But our fun fact for this is that amusing fact about Japanese food and drink is that it's considered good manners to slurp noodles in soup like ramen, but not for miso soup. Is this accurate, Emily?
I think in general to slurp, even pasta, soups, it shows like you're really enjoying the food. So I think miso soup you slurp, but not as much as ramen. Ramen's like the number one thing you have to like make more noise. It's like impossible to not slurp.
Wow. So like, do you go out of your way to kind of add more noise to it, or is it just like
it's kind of like a technique because it's really, really hot and you have to suck in air as to cool it down while you're eating it. So, and I like watch foreigners eat ramen and they're like eating it like with a fork and trying to put it in. I'm like, are you okay? Can you help?
You just have to go in.
Yeah. But I think I remember going to a friend's house when I moved to Australia, and she had a cup noodle. The packets, like not in the cup, the packets. And it was like my first time going to like an Australian friend's house. And I was like, oh yes, we're gonna have noodles. And she just started eating it like raw, like this. And I was
Culture
like,
shock.
Oh my God, that's so psychotic. And
You're like, you barbarian.
Yeah, I was so shocked. I was like, no, that's not how you eat it.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Wow. I had that experience too when I came, and then kids would bring like as a snack, they would bring like the instant noodles, right?
Yeah,
and the seasoning, instead of putting it in the soup, they would pour it into just the dry noodles and eat it. And I was like, whoa.
I know, they just start munching it like this. And I told my mom, and she's like, oh my God, you can't be friends with her.
Oh my God. That's so funny. Did I do that where you are, Christina? Did any of like
we actually created a snack where it's a little packet. Oh, I have it in my bag. Oh.
Yeah, so do you know, Emily, do you know like the mommy noodles? I think over here they're called mommy noodles.
Have it? These?
Yeah.
Like, so it's like especially a snack where it's in a packet and then
oh my God. And is it crunchy?
Or is it crunchy? And then I guess the texture is a little different, but it's like the same thing.
What flavor is it?
It's this is wasabi and garlic.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So
that's awesome.
Do they have like Japanese snacks where it's like noodles? Because in I think Chinese and I think Korean people have it too. It's like then the snack is actually like a noodle like block.
They have it,
and then you're meant to break it up.
Yeah. We have like noodle in like a circular form. It's like made in like a bite-sized one, but it's not that popular.
I was just shocked because they were eating like noodles that were made for cooking, and then my friend offered some to me and I tried it and it wasn't even crunchy. It was like stale. And I was like, how is this? Because it wasn't even the right noodle, you know, it wasn't even made for snacking. So I was like, all right, you know, if you enjoy it, you go ahead.
I think snacking over there was like really different to how I imagined it.
So you were born in Australia and then you moved.
I was born in Sydney. And when I was 3, I moved to Tokyo. I lived there for, I think, I don't really remember, like 4 years, I think. And I went to primary school there, kindergarten, and I think I couldn't read or write any English. I could speak it, but very just basic English, like hello, mom, dad, thank you kind of thing. So I think my parents really wanted me to be fluent in English, so they decided to move back to Australia. And
so your mom and your dad both, like your whole family, moved over to Japan?
The whole crew went down.
Wow, no, that's so cool. Then how did you communicate with does your dad speak a lot of Japanese?
He can speak a little bit of Japanese, but I spoke with, I think my parents were really strict with, especially my mom. Like I would just speak Japanese with my mom, and she would like make me study in Japanese, even when I was in Australia. And with my dad, it was just English.
Yeah.
So I think that really helped with speaking both languages.
Wow. So do you reckon you're like more, would you say Japanese is your first language?
It's hard. I don't know. I think when it comes to like expressing my emotions, I think Japanese maybe, but there are times where I'm like right now I'm kind of finding it hard to talk in English. I'm like really thinking about it.
Because you've been there for so long, right? And then most of the time you don't really speak English, I guess.
Wow.
I think I went back last year when I saw you. It was like the first time in 7 years that I'd been back, and I kind of forgot how to speak English really smoothly. Like I would stutter a lot, and I was in you had to declare what you're bringing into at the airport.
The customs there.
Yeah, customs, yeah. And I had seaweed in my suitcase, and then I like declared it on the paper, and then the guy's like, oh, so what do you have to declare? And I couldn't think of the word like seaweed in English. And I was like, and I was getting really nervous, and I couldn't speak because I was so nervous. And then I was like, the grass that's in the ocean, do you know the green stuff? And he's like, seaweed. And I was like, yeah, that's it.
That's so funny. Because it's like your accent is like Australian, and then your English, like everything else except the seaweed is fluent. So he must be thinking like, does this girl not know seaweed?
Yeah. And they were like, are you here alone? And I was like, yeah, I'm Australian. And I struggled to speak or like just even simple banter. I was like, oh, so nervous.
Wow. And do you identify yourself when people ask? Do you say you're Australian or Japanese more?
Yeah, when they're like, where are you from? I'll just say, I'm Australian because my passport's Australian.
Yeah, but how about like inside? What do you feel more?
Probably more Japanese.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I think
it also depends on like the context, right? Like if you're in Australia and then they feel that you're kind of not really Australian and they ask, then you would say like, oh, you know.
Yeah.
I think humor and like, yeah, I think my humor is very Australian, like very sarcastic, where the humor in Japan is very different. It's more like dry humor. But yeah, I think the way I think is very Australian sometimes. It depends, yeah.
What's something that's, you know, Australian versus Japanese thought? I'm just curious. I'm like really curious.
I think when I was living in Australia, when I would have friends over, when of course no shoes in the house, that was very normal to me. But when I would go to someone else's house, they'd leave their shoes on and they'd like walk around. And I'd be like, oh my God, your mom's going to get so angry. And I would take my shoes off, and you have to line them up like for respect and like face your shoes towards the door. And like things like that, I think just comes naturally.
Different cultural.
Mannerisms, like you bow your head a lot, and in Australia you don't do that. Like I think if I just go order a coffee or something, I'm like, oh, thank you. And then they're like, what are you doing, you know? But it's just so natural, like I think like mannerisms, body language and stuff.
I really admired how during school time, like, did you have any like cultural, you know, struggles when you were growing up? Like you felt like, oh, you know, maybe I'm too Japanese. Because for me personally, I went through a period when I was like, oh, I don't like being Asian. And then like I loved how you were, like, to me you always seemed like you were so proud of being Japanese and like speaking your language and stuff. And I was always like, as I grew up, I really admired that your parents kind of taught you Japanese and like enforced that on you. But for me, like my parents never really like made it a point to teach me, you know, Mandarin or Cantonese or anything like that. So I always admired that about you, and I was always like, wow, you know, that's really cool.
I think primary school, when I was in Japan, everyone used to say, oh my God, that's the American. Everyone just used to think that I was American because that's the stereotype. Like if you see a white person, they're automatically American. So I used to believe I was American. So, and coming to Australia, I didn't have the thought that I was mixed race or anything. I think my parents were just like, it wasn't even a topic, like we never talked about it. So I didn't think about it until high school. My mom would always pack my lunches, and it was always like onigiri, which is like a rice ball with seaweed, and you have like stuff inside it. And even my like snacks was always like very Japanese style. And I remember people like being like, oh, that's so gross, like what is that? And like I think when I got older, I wanted to be really Western. So I wanted to have like blue eyes, and I wanted to dye my hair blonde, and like I think like I used to think surfing was so cool, so I used to like lie to people like, yeah, I surf, and you know, like And I used to like not want to be associated with like Asian culture. Like I tried so hard to kind of suppress it and like not. But then I think my mom, she would take me back to Japan every year for like 2 months. So, and then I would get like really homesick. I'd want to go back to Japan and stuff. So high school was really like, I didn't want to be Japanese or anything. Yeah.
Dude, that was the same for me as well. So yeah, it's cool. We went through the same thing.
Yeah. But there wasn't many Asian people in our high school. So yeah, it was all like Western. Australian.
Like all our friends were all in high school, were all Western people.
And then Japan, all your friends had to be like Eastern people, right?
Yeah, I went to a public primary school. Well, now there's half people. We call them Hāfu, mixed race people. They're everywhere. Like you know, it's so normal now. But back in my day, it was like it was really like, oh my God, that's the girl. Like I really stood out, but I didn't really care back then.
When did you start like having more like Asian friends, like mixing more with Asian people? And then
how did your dad feel about, you know, this whole, because you're surrounding yourself with so many Asian people, right? Was he ever like, come back, you know, like?
I think my dad is like your typical Aussie bloke, Australian dad. So he doesn't care about, you know, this kind of, my mom and my dad are like polar opposites. Like my dad's like really relaxed, really chill kind of guy. And my mom is like really like, you know, everything has to be like a certain way. You have to be there like an hour early kind of thing. So I think I have a balance of both, which I think my dad's just happy with anything really.
Yeah, I guess that's how it works, right? Because if they're both like very, you know, tight about things, then you know there'd be a lot of disagreements.
Are there any traditions, Japanese traditions you can kind of talk about? Like when I was in Japan, I remember there was one street, it was at some temple, and they served food and drinks, and then apparently they were like, when you're walking you can't eat and drink, because it's like for like low class people, right, or something like that.
I think I never would recommend eating and walking at the same time. I think drinking is fine, but they consider it like, oh, you're really what's the word, like not well mannered eating and walking. But we do have like a thing called omatsuri, and during the summertime you have like festivals along the streets, and you have like little stores where they sell like okonomiyaki, which is like Japanese pancakes, and like yakitori with the chicken on the skewers and stuff. And you can, at that time, you can like walk around and eat, and they have like music playing, and everyone wears like the yukata, which is like summer kimono. I think that's when you can eat and walk and drink, but not in general. I think manners, being on the train, no one talks, and if you do, it's like very discreet, like you whisper, or like it's like you can't even breathe, you're like really like very quiet. Whereas when you see foreigners come on, they're like really loud and they're talking, and I think I don't recommend, like, if you get on a train to, like, you know, talk out loud. You just have to be like really quiet and like, you know.
I remember I was on the train and people would be answering phones and it would be like, and then like immediately like trying to hang up as quick as possible, and I was like, well, this is so interesting.
I think Japanese people are just very polite, right? Very respectful.
I mean, like, there is a stereotype, like they're very like, we have a thing called like, every Japanese people are very two-faced, where like they're very polite and kind, but they'll talk bad about you behind your back, like, oh my god, she smells, or something like that. They're very savage, I think.
I think that's because of like some kind of pent-up frustration, right? Like if you have to be polite all the time and you can't really express how you feel, right, then it's like you'll just explode behind the scenes.
I think that's why like the drinking culture here is like really, really crazy, because when you're working, everyone's like, you have to like have a different face when you're working or like when you're out in public. So
do you have any culture shocks after moving back at 18?
No culture shocks. I think when I started working, because my first job was working in a cafe in Australia. That was just a part-time job. And then when I started working as a full-time in a company, the work ethic is just so different whereas like I think if you clock off at 5 in Australia, like at 4:50 you start packing up and be like, okay, see you, bye, see you, kind of thing. But in Japan, you charge through until you can't, work anymore. Or like even if you are supposed to clock up at 8, you have to keep, just to show respect and that like, oh, I'm working really hard for this company. I'm dedicated to working, kind of thing. You have to be very mentally strong to work, especially if you're working for a big company. I think I worked for a hotel. That was my last full-time job, and the last month I worked, the busiest month of the year, which is December, you have like Christmas and New Year's Eve and stuff. I worked 160 hours overtime, and that's just overtime. And
oh my goodness.
But it was so normal. Like,
yeah,
I think after I quit and I would talk about it with like family, I think everyone was like, oh my God, that's not normal. But at that company, it's like, yeah, that's a good month. You work hard.
All your colleagues would be doing the same. You talk to your colleagues and they're like, huh, only 160?
Yeah. They'd be like, why are you complaining? I've done like 200 kind of thing. So it's like almost like a competition, like who's more dedicated, like,
Yeah.
I feel like that's just the Asian culture, right? Like in other countries too. I heard recently there's a rule called the lay low. Have you guys heard of it? Like lay low or lay down rule, where it was blowing up on Twitter, but basically they're saying like in Asia, this one was targeted to, I think, in China. And then, it's very competitive. People are overworking. So then now the younger generation is trying to change, our mental health. So they're like, instead of working hard, like it's called, I think it was this 369 rule or 696, something like that. But then when they're working hard, they're gonna, lie down on the floor now to show like, we're not gonna, keep working.
Oh
like
my God, wow.
Yeah. It's pretty intense.
Yeah. No, that's so cool though. Because I think really like something has to change. Because I know like the drinking culture and stuff, it's like it's not healthy, to be like that and to overwork yourself like that. Like there's no personal time. Like working 160 hours of overtime. Like, are you even getting enough time to sleep, like to rest?
Well, whereas hotel or any hospitality industry, you're bound to have overtime, and it's it's normal. But at this particular company, I think I would come into work on an early shift at 7 a.m. and my last train would be 12:30 p.m. And that's when they'd be like, oh, your last train, what time's your last train? They would ask me and I'd be like, oh, 12:30. Okay, you can work until then, kind of thing. So I'd just be like, So I would get home maybe around 1:30 and then I would sleep for maybe 3-4 hours and quickly get up, go back to work. Or sometimes I would sleep at the hotel, kind of thing. So they have like a little room where if you miss your last train, like they're prepared you for this. Like, oh, you're going to stay the night? Okay, you can work till morning, kind of thing.
Oh my God.
Wow.
And crazy. Right now you're doing education, right? You're a teacher?
Yeah, well.
What made that shift?
Yeah, well, I came to Japan to study fashion design and I worked in the fashion industry for, I think, 3 years. I worked in menswear, men's suits in particular, and that was really great. There is kind of like, in the fashion industry, you have like the elderly people that work there. What I mean by elderly, like older generation, like 40s, 50s, who have been working like their whole life there. And it's really hard to like level up because they like rule that kind of they have like, I don't know how to explain it, like it's hard to move up
the hierarchy.
in the company, because they've like
Oh,
guarded
is it like an age thing, like you can't be higher in position than
kind of
like the elders kind of thing?
And you can't like tell them what to do, like you're
yeah.
always kind of like below them. So I didn't like that aspect of it, and you have to like sell a certain amount, and then they pressure you, like even on your days off, like they'll be like, how much did you sell like last month, kind of thing. But so, and then I got scouted to work for a hotel industry, and then I was like, no, I've had enough. And then I took like I was supposed to take a few months off, and I went to Australia, and then COVID hit, and then I was like, jobless.
At any point during like your time over there were you like, I'm done, like I want to go back to Australia? But did you have any moments like that?
No, I think there are moments where I miss like the beach. I'm not like a swimming in the ocean type of person, but I miss just looking at it from afar. I think I miss my parents definitely every day. Like I call them like 3 times a week. But there's nothing really, the big malls. You know, we have the plaza, Sunshine Plaza.
Wouldn't the malls be way bigger in Japan though?
It's bigger, but it's upwards, like it's bigger as
like
tall.
Like a lot of stories, but quite
But in Australia, it just feels so big because it's like never ending, like this way, width way. The food portions is ridiculous in Australia, like huge.
Really? In Japan, it's not as big? I don't really remember like the food portion.
I think like McDonald's, their medium is our large. Like the drink sizes, and with coffee also we have like tiny, the small is like this big also. I think I'm like I can fit into like their medium is like our XL kind of thing.
How did you find working in the fashion industry? Like I know you said you were working in menswear, but like did you have to deal with like body image kind of like looks, you know, that kind of thing? How do you find the culture there?
Well, looks is very, very important when you're working in fashion industry. Even hotel industry, they just like, I remember they were like, oh, you should lose a bit of weight because we wore suits, and this lady was like, oh, front on you look really nice, but from the side it's more elegant if you're thinner. And I was like, oh, okay, thanks. And I remember working in the hotel industry, the way I did my makeup, they want really like dark makeup and like a red lip. This especially when you're working at nighttime, they want your makeup to be very bold so you can see more. And they were like, listen, Emily, we like your natural look, but we're going to give you makeup lessons. And they literally brought in someone from Shiseido. It's like a Japanese makeup company. And this lady was like teaching me how to wear makeup.
Oh my God.
And then this guy was like, you need to be more, you know, have your hair nicer, and can you look more presentable next time, kind of thing. And like, you need to look more feminine. And I was like, I'm tired from working.
Oh my God.
How do you even look more feminine? Like, this is my face. Like, what do you mean by that? Like,
I don't know. If it were me, I feel like I would start like turning red and embarrassed. But like, were you okay? Like, you're just like, you know, whatever.
Yeah, I think I was just too tired. I was like, okay, whatever.
Oh my God.
It's like say anything to make them happy. Just like, okay, just get away from me.
I didn't care at the time. I was like, okay, free makeup lessons, whatever.
Yeah, that's cool. What made you want to go over to Japan to study instead of staying in Australia? Because you didn't go with your parents, did you? Like you went by yourself.
Well, I think my mum is very like worried because I'm an only child and I couldn't do anything for myself back then. So my mum moved first to Japan, and she like set up my granddad's old house, and she helped me get into a college, and she helped me like figure it out the first year. And I went to fashion school because I think I was in a high school in Australia. They let us do like once a week, go to a TAFE or something.
Yeah.
So I studied like sewing and fashion design during high school. And I was like, oh, I love this. And then there was a person who taught at this fashion college in Japan, and he used to work for Dior. He was like really, really famous, and I was like, oh, I really want to learn from him. So I just was like, Mom, can I move to Japan? She was like, okay. And she like said everything for me.
So keen.
Yeah, she was like very, very supportive. I think my dad was more like kind of heartbroken that I was leaving.
Yeah. How did your parents go over to visit you often when you were there? Because you said you didn't come back for like, what, 7 years, was it?
Well, my dad would come every year for my birthday. Yeah, he would come at least once a year. And my mum would come like every 2 years. She's like, I think my dad wanted to see me more. Like my mum was more like, oh, go off, do your own thing. But
this is one question we like asking our guests. So what's the top travel destinations in Japan that only locals know about? So not on Google's, top attractions.
Yeah. That's such a good question. I think where I used to live, it's still in Tokyo, but it's a place called Shimokitazawa, and it's a bit different now, but it used to be like a thrift store town. Like they have all the thrift stores, vintage stores, and like the old Japanese izakaya, like bars, and they have like it's in Japan, but it doesn't feel like Japan because it's very kind of, there's like all these alleyways with like thrift shops, vintage like stores. I think that's like a really, really nice place if you like that kind of shopping. Yeah, I think for me that's a place that I would take my friends. Yeah.
How about food?
Is there a food that you can recommend to us?
I went with a friend yesterday. She's also half Japanese, half Australian, and we went to like a Japanese bar area, like an izakaya, a bar, and you just order on an iPad. Like you can order chicken skewers or like squid, and you just keep tapping like, and food just keeps coming. So I think we ordered like a whole squid. I don't know if you guys like seafood, but it's like a squid, and they just chop it up and you eat it with like ginger and stuff. I think Japanese bars are definitely something I would recommend because like the food there is just amazing because they cook it right in front of you and it's fresh.
So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode with Emily. Check back in with us next week for another episode with our friend Annie, who's a Taiwanese American real estate agent. She chats with us about property and different investing strategies. Don't miss it.